The sky had been calm, deceptively calm, with streaks of orange and pink painting the horizon as the private jet cut through the air. Inside, the passengers were lulled into a false sense of security. Soft murmurs floated over the hum of the engines, and the occasional clink of glasses punctuated the quiet. The billionaire CEO sat in his seat, impeccably dressed, legs crossed, eyes fixed on a tablet that displayed a flurry of numbers and reports. He had been reviewing quarterly projections, strategies for global expansion, his mind juggling millions as effortlessly as breathing. Around him, a handful of other travelers relaxed, some dozing, others absorbed in their own screens, none of them noticing the faint, almost imperceptible shudder that began deep within the plane's structure. It started subtly at first, a slight vibration that could have been dismissed as turbulence. But within seconds, the groaning of metal filled the cabin, a low, ominous sound that set every nerve on edge. The jet jerked violently, throwing cups, papers, and passengers into a chaotic dance. Screams erupted as oxygen masks dropped, alarms blaring with shrill insistence. Panic took hold like wildfire, people clung to seats, grasped hands, and shouted over the deafening cacophony. The billionaire CEO's calm composure shattered in an instant as he was thrown against the side of the cabin, the tablet slipping from his hands into the abyss of his lap. His sharp eyes, always calculating, darted around, assessing, thinking, analyzing, and realizing with horror that the jet was tilting, dipping, the ocean below rising to meet them far too quickly. Somewhere nearby, a single dad, not a passenger but a bystander, had witnessed the plane's descent from the deck of a small fishing boat. He was a man forged by hardship and the steady rhythm of responsibility, his hands calloused from work and his body honed by necessity, not luxury. Instinct overrode hesitation. Without a second thought, he dove into the frigid water, muscles coiling and propelling him forward against the pull of the waves. The cold bit at his skin, threatening to sap his strength, but he ignored it. All that existed was the jet, the flailing figures, and the urgent, singular goal of reaching them before it was too late. Inside the waterlogged wreckage, the CEO struggled desperately, trying to keep his head above the churning surface. The ocean was merciless, tossing bodies, debris, and luggage like toys in the hands of a child. Panic gripped him, fingers numb, mind foggy with the realization that death had come swiftly, unexpectedly. He kicked and flailed, gasping for air, feeling the icy fingers of the sea tug at him. Then he saw him, a figure breaking through the waves, determination etched into every movement, muscles slicing through the water with relentless purpose. The single dad reached him, extending a strong, sure hand. "Grab on," he shouted, voice cutting through the roar of the water. The CEO, drenched and terrified, latched on, relief and disbelief washing over him in equal measure. The man fought against the currents, dragging the billionaire toward a floating piece of wreckage, a piece of hope amid the chaos. He shielded the CEO from the worst of the waves, his own body absorbing the punishment of the ocean as he pulled them toward safety. Each stroke was a battle, each wave a reminder of how fragile human life could be, how easily it could be snatched away. Passengers floated nearby, some clinging to fragments of the shattered jet, others bobbing helplessly, but the dad's focus never wavered. The CEO, gasping and shivering, finally allowed himself to trust the man holding him, letting go of the rigid control that had defined his life. In that moment, stripped of status, wealth, and influence, he was simply a man, utterly dependent on the courage and strength of another. The world above them seemed distant, irrelevant, there was only the struggle to survive, the icy water, the roar of the sea, and the unyielding human will to save a life. With every powerful stroke, the single dad defied exhaustion, refusing to let the ocean claim another victim. The waves crashed over them again and again, each one threatening to pull them under, but he held firm, a living barrier between death and the man he had vowed to save. And in the CEO's eyes, amidst terror and disbelief, there flickered a spark of understanding, a recognition that survival, sometimes, came not from wealth or power, but from the courage and resolve of a stranger who refused to let him go. Hours stretched like eternity as the single dad fought against the merciless ocean, his arms aching, lungs burning, but never letting go of the billionaire CEO clinging desperately to him. The water was a relentless adversary, each wave threatening to tear them apart, cold seeping into their bones and numbing fingers until the very act of holding on became an act of sheer will. The CEO, who had spent his life commanding boardrooms and bending markets to his will, was powerless now, eyes wide with fear, teeth chattering as the icy water washed over him. He tried to speak, but words were swallowed by the roar of the waves. Instead, he gripped the dad's arm with a desperate intensity that mirrored the panic clawing at his chest. Somewhere, distant and hazy through the spray and foam, the outline of a lifeboat bobbed in the waves, partially torn from the wreckage and drifting helplessly. The single dad guided them toward it, kicking and pulling, muscles screaming in protest, ignoring the growing tremor of exhaustion. Every movement was precise yet frantic, a delicate balance between brute strength and desperate calculation. He barked instructions, sharp and commanding, "Keep your head above water. Don't let go." The CEO nodded, powerless, the veneer of confidence stripped away, replaced by raw vulnerability and a dawning realization of how fragile life could be. Around them, chaos continued unabated. Floating debris from the shattered jet collided and spun, small fragments slicing through the water, brushing against their limbs. A brief surge of panic hit the CEO as he saw the fragments closing in, threatening to separate him from his rescuer, but the dad adjusted his grip, pulling him closer, shielding him instinctively. He murmured reassurances, low and steady, a calm amid the storm, "We're going to make it. Just hold on. I won't let you go." Each word carried more than comfort, it was a vow, unspoken yet binding, forged in the crucible of survival. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours, until finally, their hands met the edge of the lifeboat. With a final, Herculean effort, the dad lifted the CEO aboard, then hauled himself up beside him, gasping, shivering, every fiber of his being screaming in protest. Both were drenched, skin pale, and trembling, but alive. The waves continued to lap against the side of the lifeboat, but the immediate danger had passed, replaced by the exhaustion and quiet terror of those who had glimpsed death and survived. The CEO's chest heaved as he tried to catch his breath, and he looked at the man who had saved him with a mixture of awe and disbelief. For the first time in his life, the billionaire realized that his power, his wealth, and his influence meant nothing in the face of nature's fury. Survival had not been a result of money or status but of courage, strength, and human instinct. And though his body shook and his mind raced, there was an undeniable gratitude burning in his chest, a recognition that the stranger beside him, a single dad with no grand title or fortune, had given him a gift beyond measure. He had been plucked from the brink of death by a man whose life he knew nothing about, a man whose simple, unassuming bravery had ensured that he would see another sunrise. As the lifeboat bobbed gently now, far from the wreckage, the CEO finally spoke, voice hoarse and trembling, I don't know how to thank you." The dad, eyes tired but steady, offered a faint, exhausted smile, brushing water from his face. "Just live," he said, the words simple yet heavy with meaning. The CEO nodded, absorbing every syllable, understanding that life had just handed him a second chance, and it was a chance he owed entirely to this man who had refused to let the sea win. Sunlight spilled across the penthouse the next morning, illuminating sleek marble floors and walls adorned with abstract art, gold accents glinting in the soft glow. The billionaire CEO sat behind his massive desk, a cup of coffee trembling slightly in his hand, his normally crisp suit rumpled from the previous night's ordeal. His eyes, bloodshot and heavy, darted around the room, but his thoughts were far from the opulence surrounding him. They were back on the ocean, on the icy water, and on the man who had pulled him from death's grasp. He couldn't stop replaying the rescue, the strength, the calm determination, the selflessness, and a gnawing feeling of awe mixed with something unfamiliar, humility. For the first time, he felt powerless, utterly dependent on a stranger's courage. Despite his immense wealth and influence, he realized that the man who had saved him had nothing to gain but the satisfaction of doing the right thing. That thought gnawed at him, unsettling in its intensity. His mind raced as he picked up the phone, his fingers hovering over the contacts list. The CEO had no hesitation, he needed to find the man who had changed his life overnight. Within hours, through calls, inquiries, and relentless tracking, the single dad was located. He arrived at the penthouse, a stark contrast to the polished environment. Jeans, a worn hoodie, and a humble air that betrayed none of the weight of what he had done. The CEO, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, felt a mixture of curiosity, admiration, and a twinge of awkwardness. The single dad looked around, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings with a mixture of awe and discomfort. The CEO noticed the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way he shifted his weight, clearly unaccustomed to the extravagance around him. Yet there was a quiet confidence in the way he stood, a strength that no luxury could replicate, forged from years of single-handedly navigating life's challenges. It struck the CEO then, painfully, how little his wealth had prepared him for true courage, and how much this man had shown him in mere hours. The room was silent for a moment, charged with unspoken recognition, a bond forged in the crucible of survival that neither money nor status could replicate. The CEO gestured toward the leather chairs, offering a seat, but the dad shook his head slightly, remaining standing. He was cautious, wary of being drawn into a world so far removed from his own, a world of power, influence, and endless opportunity. Yet he felt the weight of the CEO's gaze, a mixture of gratitude and respect that made him pause. The billionaire, normally commanding, persuasive, and unshakable, found himself uncertain, almost vulnerable in front of this man who had risked everything without a second thought. He searched for words, finally saying, I owe you my life. I need to find a way to repay you, even if it's just a start. The single dad chuckled softly, a sound roughened by fatigue and disbelief. You're alive, he said simply, shrugging off the weight of praise. That's all that matters. But the CEO was insistent, driven by a mix of obligation and curiosity. He couldn't allow this act of bravery to go unacknowledged. As the morning sun continued to flood the office, they both stood in an uneasy stillness, each assessing the other. One was a man of immense wealth who had been humbled in a single night, the other a man of modest means whose courage had changed everything. And in that moment, neither could deny the strange, irrevocable shift that had occurred in their lives. The CEO's mind raced with possibilities, imagining the life he could offer the single dad and his child, a chance to secure a future that had previously seemed unattainable. But he also sensed the man's pride, the quiet strength that refused to bend easily to wealth or influence. It was a delicate balance, one that required patience, respect, and recognition of the unspoken bond between them. And as he watched the single dad, he realized that life had a way of introducing people at the most unexpected, transformative moments, and that sometimes, true value could not be measured in millions, but in courage, trust, and the willingness to risk everything for another human being. The CEO rose from his chair, his movements deliberate, almost hesitant, as if approaching this man required more care than any business negotiation he had ever conducted. He stepped closer, the polished marble floor echoing under his expensive shoes, but all the trappings of wealth felt irrelevant now. He stopped in front of the single dad, searching his face for any hint of ego, pride, or expectation. Instead, he found only quiet strength, resilience, and a humble determination that seemed impervious to the allure of money, fame, or power. For a moment, neither spoke, both caught in the weight of the previous night, a shared memory that had altered the course of their lives forever. Finally, the CEO extended a hand, but hesitated, unsure if formality mattered in a moment defined by life and death rather than protocol. You saved my life, he said, voice steady yet laden with emotion. I don't know how to repay you, but I want to try. The single dad's lips curved into a small, wry smile, a mixture of amusement and disbelief. He had never sought recognition, never wanted accolades, saving a life had been instinct, a duty born from necessity, and the notion of repayment felt almost absurd. Yet the sincerity in the CEO's eyes, the raw intensity of his gratitude, carried a weight that could not be ignored. Over the following days, the billionaire immersed himself in reshaping the single dad's world. Offers of financial security, opportunities for his child's education, a home that no longer felt cramped or precarious, all presented with the insistence and precision of a man accustomed to making things happen. At first, the single dad resisted, his pride acting as a shield against what felt like charity. He had always relied on his own hands, his own determination, and the idea of accepting help, even life-changing help, seemed foreign and unsettling. But the CEO was relentless, patient, and unwavering, weaving the possibilities into a vision that promised not just survival, but transformation. As the days unfolded, the single dad began to see glimpses of a future he had never dared imagine. His child laughed more freely in the new spaces of the upgraded home, the security of stability replacing the constant tension of uncertainty. Opportunities arose, ventures, mentorships, experiences that were worlds away from the life he had known. And through it all, the CEO remained a steady presence, a reminder that courage could reshape lives as much as wealth could, that the bond forged in crisis could redefine destinies. In quiet moments, as the single dad looked across the table at the CEO, he recognized a truth that transcended money, power, and status. One act of bravery had irrevocably changed 2 lives. He understood that heroism was not measured by accolades or boardroom victories, but by the willingness to act selflessly, even in the face of overwhelming danger. And in that realization, he felt a profound sense of purpose, a recognition that his own life, once constrained by struggle, had been forever altered, not by luck or chance, but by courage, connection, and the extraordinary human capacity to rise in the moment that mattered most.